Senator Chris Murphy walked into that hearing room calm, composed, and apologizing for missing a phone call. But the moment he adjusted his microphone, it was clear he wasn't there for small talk. What unfolded wasn't a partisan jab or a heated disagreement. It was one of the most comprehensive, blistering, methodical dismantlings of a federal agency we've seen in years, delivered with a seriousness that made the entire room sit up straighter.
Madam Chair, Madam Secretary, thank you for being here. I'm sorry that I missed your call yesterday. I look forward to working closely with you. I say this with seriousness and respect, but your department is out of control. You are spending like you don't have a budget. You're on the verge of running out of money for the fiscal year. You are illegally refusing to spend funds that have been authorized by this Congress and appropriated by this committee. You are ignoring the immigration laws of this nation, implementing a brand new immigration system that you have invented that has little relation to the statutes that you are required, that you are commanded to follow, as spelled out in your oath of office. You are routinely violating the rights of immigrants who may not be citizens, but whether you like it or not, they have constitutional and statutory rights when they reside in the United States. Your agency acts as if laws don't matter, as if the election gave you some mandate to violate the Constitution and the laws passed by this Congress. It did not give you that mandate. You act as if your disagreement with the law, or even the public's disagreement with the law, is relevant and gives you the ability to create your own law. It does not give you that ability. Let's start with your spending. You are on track to trigger the Anti-Deficiency Act. That means you are going to spend more money than you have been allocated by Congress. This is a rare occurrence, and it is wildly illegal. Your agency will be broke by July, over 2 months before the end of the fiscal year. You may not think that Congress has provided enough money to ICE, but the Constitution and the federal law does not allow you to spend more money than you have been given or to invent money. And this obsession with spending at the border, as the chairwoman mentioned, has left the country unprotected elsewhere. The security threats to the United States are higher, not lower, than when Trump came to office. To fund the border, you have illegally gutted spending for cybersecurity. As we speak, Russian and Chinese hackers are having a field day attacking our nation. You've withdrawn funds for disaster prevention. Storms are going to kill more people in this country because of your illegal withholding of these funds. Your myopia about the border, fueled by President Trump's prejudice against people who speak a different language, has shattered many of this country's most important defenses. Now let's talk about the impoundments. When Congress appropriates funds for a specific purpose, the administration has no discretion as to whether to spend or not spend that money unless you go through a very specific process with this committee. Let me give you two of many instances of this illegal impoundment. The first is the Shelter and Services Program. Senator Britt may want to zero that account out, but that account is funded, and it was funded in a bipartisan way. You don't like the program. Your policy is to treat migrants badly. I think that's abhorrent, but it doesn't matter that you don't like the program. You cannot cancel spending in this program, and you cannot use the funds as you have to fund other things, like ICE. You have also canceled citizenship and integration grants, which help lawful permanent residents become citizens, helping them take the citizenship test. I know your goal is to try to make life as hard as possible for immigrants, but that goal is not broadly shared by the American public. That's why Congress, in a bipartisan way, for decades, has funded this program to help immigrants in this country become citizens. Now let's talk about why encounters at the southern border are down so much. This is clearly going to be your primary talking point today. You will tell us that it represents a success. But the primary reason why encounters are down is because you are brazenly violating the law every hour of every day. You are refusing to allow people showing up at the southern border to apply for asylum. I acknowledge that you don't believe that people should be able to apply for asylum, but you don't get to choose that. The White House doesn't get to choose that. The law requires you to process people who are showing up at the border and who claim asylum. Why? Because our asylum law is a bipartisan commitment, an effort to correct for our nation's unconscionable decision to deny entry to Jews to this country who were being hunted and killed by the Nazis. Our nation, Republicans and Democrats, decided, wrote it into law, that we would not repeat that horror ever again, and thus we would allow for people who were fleeing terror and torture to come here, arrive at the border, and make a case for asylum. Finally, let's talk about these disappearances. In an autocratic society, people who the regime does not like are people who are protesting the regime. They are just often picked up off the street, spirited away, sometimes to open-ended detention, sometimes they're never seen again. What you are doing, both the individuals who have legal rights to stay here, like Kilmar Abrego Garcia, or students who are just protesting Trump's policies, is immoral. And to follow the theme, it is illegal. You have no right to deport a student visa holder with no due process, simply because they have spoken in a way that offends the president. You can't remove migrants who a court has given humanitarian protection from removal. Now, reports suggest that you are planning to remove immigrants with no due process and send them to prisons in Libya. Libya is in the middle of a civil war. It is subject to a level 4 travel advisory, meaning we tell American citizens never to travel to Libya. We don't have an embassy there because it is not safe for our diplomats. Sending migrants with pending asylum claims into a war zone just because it's cruel is so deeply disturbing. Listen, I understand that my Republican colleagues on this committee don't view the policy the way that I do. My Republican colleagues don't share my level of concern for the way that this administration treats immigrants. That's fine. But what I don't understand is why we don't have consensus in the Senate and on this committee on the decision by this administration to impound the spending that we have decided together to allocate in defense of this nation. We as an appropriations committee, we work interminable hours to write and pass a budget. This budget is really hard to write and pass. And so we make ourselves irrelevant when we allow the administration to ignore what we have decided. And then when we look the other way, when the administration rounds up immigrants who are here illegally and have committed no offenses worthy of detainment, we also do potential irreversible damage to the Constitution. These should not be partisan concerns, destroying the power of Congress, eroding individuals' constitutional rights. This should matter to both parties. Madam Secretary, thank you for being here, and I look forward to your testimony.
Murphy began by painting a picture of a department spiraling out of control, not in a metaphorical sense, but in a literal, legal, structural sense. He accused the Department of Homeland Security under Secretary Kristi Noem of behaving as if the law was optional, as if Congress had become irrelevant, and as if the norms that define how American government functions could be reinterpreted on a whim. And the power of his words came from the fact that he didn't generalize, he itemized. He started with the budget. Most Americans don't pay attention to appropriations law, but the Anti-Deficiency Act is one of the few places where Congress drew a bright red line. No federal agency can spend money it hasn't been given. Violating that law isn't just a bureaucratic mistake. It's one of the rare financial offenses that can actually become criminal. And Murphy wasn't speculating. He said flat out that DHS was on track to break it by July. That's not mismanagement. That's a potential constitutional crisis. But he didn't stop at the money. He dug straight into the heart of immigration law, a field built on decades of bipartisan decisions, international obligations, and historical scars. Murphy reminded the country why our asylum laws even exist, because the United States made a devastating mistake during World War II when it turned away Jewish families fleeing the Nazis. That shame shaped the modern asylum system, and Murphy argued that Noem's DHS was now dismantling it piece by piece. According to him, asylum seekers were being blocked at the southern border, denied the right to make their claim. Shelters funded by Congress were being drained of resources because DHS was quietly rerouting those funds elsewhere. Programs that help legal permanent residents study for citizenship were being frozen, not because Congress cut them, but because the department unilaterally decided to. To Murphy, this wasn't just unwise, it was illegal. And then came the part that caused an unmistakable shift in the room. Murphy accused DHS of not only deporting immigrants without due process, but planning to send them to Libya. Not just another country, not just a risky destination. Libya, a nation in active civil war, marked with the U.S. government's highest-level travel warning, a level 4 advisory. A country so unstable that American diplomats themselves are not allowed to set foot there. And the charge was chilling, that migrants with pending asylum cases, people protected under U.S. law, could be transported into the hands of militias, warlords, were the chaos of a fractured state. Murphy compared that practice to the tactics of authoritarian regimes, the kind where dissenters are swept off the street and disappear into the shadows of a system that no longer distinguishes between legal and illegal detention. That wasn't hyperbole, that was context. This was a senator telling the American people that if you strip due process from one group, history has already shown what comes next. But perhaps the most revealing moment wasn't a legal point or a moral argument. It was when Murphy talked about Congress itself. He didn't defend the institution out of pride. He warned that if Congress writes checks and the administration refuses to cash them, if Congress sets laws and the administration chooses to ignore them, then Congress no longer governs. And once the legislative branch becomes optional, the balance of power, the backbone of American democracy, starts to collapse. This wasn't about left versus right. Murphy said it bluntly: destroying congressional power and eroding constitutional rights should terrify both parties. What happened in that hearing wasn't just an argument over immigration. It was a warning about how fragile the guardrails of democracy really are when any administration, regardless of ideology, decides it can write its own rules. If you're following the evolution of American governance, if you care about how power is used and misused, this moment matters. It's one of the clearest examples yet of lawmakers confronting not just policy decisions, but the philosophy of an administration that believes its interpretation of the law can override the law itself. And if you want more breakdowns that don't just replay the sound bites but unpack the deeper meaning, the history, and the stakes behind moments like this, make sure you subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications. These hearings aren't just political theater, they're snapshots of where the country is heading, and together we'll analyze every step of that path.